Hey everybody, this is my waterfall tank and I've been tinkering around with it a little bit, and I decided before I go any further I want to get some video. I want to do a before and after video, although I guess technically this can't really be a before and after video since I've already done some stuff. But I do want to go over what it looks like now and what I've already done and what I intend to do, and then we'll see the back side of the video where we actually look at everything after I finished it up, and we'll see how big of a difference it makes. Probably won't make that big of a difference. So I've already done a fairly significant water change, and I wiped down the front glass. That's why the tank is so nice and bright and clear and easy to see into. I even wiped down the glass on the sides a little bit. I got that side, somewhat. You can still see some algae growing on it. And then likewise with this side over here, I did a little bit of clearing it off. You can see through it a little better now than you could before. But I've recently added 5 nearite snails, which are doing an amazing job of cleaning this tank up. All these rocks down here on the bottom, you can see how clean they look, and then of course you can see the areas where, over here in particular, you can see the clean spots versus the green. Well, that was all green. All of that was all green. All of these rocks were just as dark green as that before those nearite snails got in here. They've cleaned all of that up. They've cleaned all of the rocks over here up. I'm actually getting to see some natural wood color come out in the wood where they're cleaning all the algae off of the wood. They are just doing a fantastic job of getting this tank cleaned up. So I'm really happy about the nearite snails being in there. Didn't do a gravel vac or anything like that. I did put on my little filter to make sure I didn't remove any frogs by accident like I did in the previous water change. So that's about all we're going to do with the tank itself. I may throw the hose back in there and do another quick water change just because this tank gets so tannin stained so quickly that getting the water nice and clear again will be nice, because it'll only be a few days before it looks like I spilled my tea in there again. So getting on to what we're going to be doing up here, this is where all of the little fiddly action is going to take place, because I'm going to get in there and do some actual gardening rather than fish tank type maintenance. And so far I've been looking around for aphids, and I haven't found any. I haven't gone over it with the fine-tooth comb yet, but I haven't found any aphids so far. So I think my treatment has been effective and I've gotten rid of them. I've also taken my bromelade plant, I believe that's what it's called, which is this right here, and put it down there just out of the way. Now that is not in that brackish water. It's not in contact with the water at all. It's sitting up on a stone. I don't know how well that plant would deal with brackish water. In fact, I don't know a lot about that plant at all. I don't know if that's one of the kind of plants that can live with wet feet in boggy sort of conditions. I don't know if it lives in the treetops with very dry roots like an orchid. I do know that the pockets that form hold water, so it does get some of its water like that. I assume it comes from conditions where it gets a lot of water, but sporadically. So it probably isn't rooted into a very moist place. It gets its water from the rain and that sort of thing. So I don't know how well it would do where I had it before, which was right where this planter is now. And I definitely had its feet wet. It was just constantly being moistened, but with aerated water. That's important. It's very different than just having a flower pot that you overwater. That kills your plants because it's pushing the oxygen out. But when you've got plants with wet feet that are in running water that's oxygenated, that's a very different type of circumstances. You don't have that anaerobic, acidic water that is going to dissolve your roots and kill your plant. So that is something a little different going on, and that's actually why I can have so many of these plants that you wouldn't normally think about as living, with their roots directly in water. That's why I can do it, is because the water is well oxygenated. So with this planter, this is one of my cloth planters, so if I can get just a corner of it down into the water, it will keep it moist just due to capillary action, or you could call it the wick effect. But right now it is not in the water, and I think for now we're going to leave it that way. I've got 3 little seedlings that have just sprouted. I don't know if you can make them out or not, but I'm not going to tell you what they are just yet. I've got them planted. I hope that we will get a beautiful cascade that comes down. It's a very sun-loving plant, or at least it can tolerate a lot of sun, unlike a lot of these plants that are sort of struggling under this LED, which is significant. So hopefully we will have lots and lots of flowers here in the very near future. I really want to see some flowers on this. I know it'll sort of change the vibe we got going on here. It's sort of a deep foresty kind of vibe where there's not a lot of, you just don't expect to see flowers in a situation like this. But we're gonna, because I really, really need to see some bright colors and some flowers. I'm losing my mind with this winter. We just got another 3 inches of snow this morning. And, so I'm down here doing some gardening, and this is my substitute for real sunlight, and gardening is being down here. Anyway, moving on. We're going to do little odds and ends, like see the grass growing out of here. Probably leave that little bit of stuff because that's not really getting in the way. This tuft of grass is getting a little obnoxious. I'm probably just going to get in there with some scissors. I don't know if I'm going to try to uproot it. It'll probably do more disruption than is worth it. I'll probably just cut the grass and let it grow back, and as it grows back in, I can always just cut it again. Or we'll see. Maybe I'll give it a little tug and see if I can't get it to come up without uprooting a lot of other stuff. But other than that, we're just going to go through maybe some of the blackness you can kind of see back there. That's actually that green slime algae. I can remove some of that. I've got a lot of, dead growth right there that I can get taken care of, and we'll get rid of that. Do have right now, we've got this light lit, and that is a 3000K floodlight, and I've got it angled kind of high so that we get some light up here on my new plants. If we turn that off, you can see they're not, the bright arc of the light is kind of missing them right there. So while this isn't putting a lot of light on them, it is helping. It is giving them some light, and I just need to encourage them to get going. And once we get a little bit of growth and we get them, hanging down here, then they'll be in the light, and then they'll actually probably start curling upwards, growing towards my artificial sun here. So that's all I've got planned. Again, I might do another little brief water change, pull that filter out of there again. I just pulled it out once this morning, but it gets clogged fast enough that, doing a double water change on top of it probably would constitute just throwing another filter in there, because why not? So that is a little bit of a look before I start tinkering. So we'll call this your before, and here's your after. So not a lot to see unless you really look closely and pay close attention to detail, but I did all the things I was talking about doing nonetheless. Again, I know it wasn't going to make a big difference visually, but there you go. So the grass was indeed, as soon as I tugged on it, this whole area of moss started moving. So I cut it as close to the roots as I could. I even tried to get the main bulk of the root ball sort of tugged up a little bit and then cut off. So we'll see whether that ever grows back or not. Regardless, doesn't matter. I've got all these other little bits and pieces. In fact, I wanted to pull a few of these little tiny pieces of grass out because these come out easily. Little single root on them. So I actually forgot to pull a couple of those little odds and ends out. But I noticed a few things while I was doing this, and I want to talk about them. If you'll look, well, we'll get to those in a moment, but if you look up here, you can see where I did indeed clean away a lot of that green algae. I got a lot of the algae off of the structure itself, and that again is just that green maidenhair or maiden's tresses algae. I trimmed a lot of the dead stuff out of my philodendron there, and I gave everything a nice treatment and watering and feeding. So the way I did that was I mixed up my little spray bottle with a little bit of just general purpose fertilizer, just a basic 15-15-15, and a little bit of hydrogen peroxide, my old friend hydrogen peroxide. And the hydrogen peroxide is there to kill off any aphids. I had started out by treating with soapy water, and I think that killed the bulk of them, but I did still find a few after that. And I wound up finding out about the hydrogen peroxide treatment, and I switched over to doing it that way because that's completely safe for my fish. And I haven't had any issues with the aphids since I've started using the hydrogen peroxide. So it also adds a little bit of oxygen to the environment. It oxygenates the roots down, you know, when you spray it on there. Now again, I was spraying it on a very mild concentration, so it shouldn't have been enough to really, you know, fizz up once it got down into the soil as I sprayed it. But it still did add a little bit of oxygen to the environment, added a little bit of oxygen to the moss, a little bit of moisture to the moss, so hopefully that'll help that come back a little bit. So since I've been spraying this with hydrogen peroxide mixed with my water, I've been seeing some really good results. I'm happy with it. And then of course with the little bit of fertilizer I put on there, that's just a little bit of foliar feeding, because the roots basically are getting access to the water, and the water is more or less a hydroponic system, or I should say an aquaponic system, that has fish and fish food and all that kind of stuff breaking down in there. I've even got wood breaking down, and all that stuff is contributing to the nutrients that are in the water. But giving a little extra light foliar feeding is never a bad idea if you want to perk everything up and get it nice and green again. I did want to make a little side note. Recently I had someone comment about feeding with my frozen cubes of bloodworms, and they suggested that I rinse them out. I was going to do a video specifically about that. I deliberately do not rinse them out. I throw those in and all of the dirty water with it as I melt them into a glass of water, and then I pour the whole glass of water in there, the dirty water and everything. And the reason I do that is because the binding agent they use to create those blocks, to create those cubes of worms, is usually guar gum. And when guar gum gets in your system and breaks down, it will elevate the phosphates in your tank. And a lot of people that are trying to control algae and are worried about that sort of thing want to limit the amount of phosphates they put in their tank. Completely harmless to your fish, absolutely harmless to your fish, but they will contribute to algal growth, especially in addition to elevated levels of nitrates. The nitrates and the phosphates together are a double whammy when it comes to growing algae. And the reason is because the feeding I just put on here, the NPK, the N and the P are the nitrates and the phosphates. So I want that in there. I want those extra phosphates in there. I've got a lot of plants that need food, so I put those cubes in there whole. I don't throw them in frozen and whole. I learned my lesson by watching one of my creek chubs in another tank eat the entire cube while it was still frozen. So I do thaw them out in water. I do rinse them when I'm putting them in other tanks. But for this tank, I put the cubes in there whole, so to speak, with all that dirty water and everything, because I do want to elevate the phosphates. So if you want to reduce the phosphates, rinse your frozen brine shrimp, bloodworms, etc. Those things that come frozen in little cubes have guar gum as their binding agent. So one of the things I noticed while I was in here is, if you will look, you can see I'm starting to get little baby ferns. So I'm interested to see what's going to happen. Are these going to send down roots and attach, and are we going to get new plants growing off of the mother here? Or are they going to sort of wither and die? Is it not really going to go? I don't know, but I'm waiting to find out. I'm really interested to see how this is going to turn out. I've got so much stuff going on back here that I don't even know what's new growth and what's not. In fact, I'm looking at something that actually looks like it's probably insect eggs. Let's see if we can zoom in. And if I can find them. Those two little things right, let's see where my finger is. Right at the very center tip of my finger, you'll see those little sort of pinkish, it looks like there's two of them. They're sort of pinkish and clear. So, right on the tip right there is where we were looking at them. Not sure what that is, but probably going to go ahead and just get them out of there, because they're nothing I put in there, so they're probably nothing I want in there. And again, I'm assuming it's probably going to be some kind of insect eggs, and while some insects may not be that big a deal, others might be problematic, so we're just going to go ahead and alleviate that right from the get-go. So we've got plenty of new growth going on with my water sprite. I've got lots of new growth going on with my philodendron. You can see all this stuff here. This is beginning to establish a little bit, and I want to root to this. This piece has actually rooted to this. If you look down here, That actually is growing up and out of my little soil patch there with the log next to it. So tons and tons of stuff going on in here if you're, if you've got the time invested in it the way I do. For the casual observer, you might just look at a lot of plants and see it as being all, lush and growing. But for me, I'm looking at all the little details and everything and watching it change, and, I'm snipping this and changing that. And so I've been really enjoying the development of this so far. Lastly, I will add that I put this new batch of dead nettles in, dug them up from out in the yard, and so far they're looking pretty good. They are also the beneficiary of my secondary light over there. Again, I know that's not a ton of light shining on this, and it is a 3000K color temperature. That's more for me than it is for the plants. I just don't need all that harsh blue light shining in my face when I'm in here all the time. So that is fresh from the yard. It looks nice and good. I'm getting new growth on it. You can see that new growth right there, all those beautiful colors on those leaves as they come out. Really, really pretty plant. So hopefully that, now that I've got the roots coming down here and in the water, I'll be able to then grow them out and over, and I'll finally be able to cover this ugly broken end of this branch right here. I don't mind the branch, it's just this broken end I find very unattractive, and I want to get those vines, coming out and sort of create sort of a trellis effect. We've already got a little bit of that going on down here, and again, this will grow more onto it and attach to it more, and that'll fill in and become much more natural. And at some point, I'm probably going to try to get something attached to and growing up onto this piece of wood here. Maybe I'll bring some ivy in. Maybe we'll do some ivy and really let this thing eat itself alive, and the ivy will just destroy this thing in a matter of months. So it's getting there. It's really starting to grow in and establish. I'm really, really looking forward to our surprise plants that we're going to have growing out of there, and I'll give you a close look at them, as close as I can anyway. So if you can identify them, if you want to take a guess on what you think they are, you're welcome to. But for now, we're going to keep that as a surprise, and we're going to wait and see what they turn out to be. And hopefully they'll continue to grow and they'll do okay under this light. I suspect they will. So, all right, everybody, that was my long-winded video for today. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching. Make sure you're subscribed, and then don't forget, of course, this one is my waterfall tank. So thanks again. See you real soon in the next one.